Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to be going over an article here. It's called Why Feminist Films Flop. Well, I think we all know the answer to that one because they're crap. And this particular article covers the Charlie's Angels movie that came out a few months ago. Now this article is from November, so obviously it's a few months old, but it's relevant to the times because every few months or so, another movie comes out with clearly feminist ideas they're trying to put out there. And it's terrible. And so once again, you have another movie came out, a giant flop, and it wasn't what they expected to be. And so hopefully in time, at the end of the day, it boils down to the bottom line that these crappy movies will stop. So I'm going to go through this article and share my thoughts here. And it says here, title of the article is, Why Feminist Films Flop. No, misogyny is not to blame for the box office woes of new Charlie's Angels film. It says here, the new film reboot of the Charlie's Angels franchise will be released in the UK next week. It is written, directed, and produced by Elizabeth Banks, who also stars in it as the wisecracking Bosley. Maybe she did the catering too. Banks is a generally funny actor, and the Pitch Perfect movies she produced are highly enjoyable. But I was not excited to see Charlie's Angels, and that seems to reflect a wider sentiment. The film bombed at the U.S. box office. It cost $48 million to make, but only brought in $8.6 million on its opening weekend. Man, that's terrible. Well, that will teach a lesson to anybody else that want to put out some of these movies with these ideas. It says here, there are several competing theories as to why this has happened. Some cite the film's lack of star power. Others point to a reboot fatigue among cinema-goers. Some of the more feminist reviewers have aired their disappointment that, while the film is more feminist take on Charlie's Angels, it doesn't do enough to shake the jiggle television out of the original show and two early 2000s films. But the main factor here seems to be the lack of public interest in feminist remakes. Recent films like Charlie's Angels, Ocean's 8, and Ghostbusters all sold purely off the back of their female-led cast and in some cases female-led crew, failed to attract an audience, and some have inadvertently claimed this is because we live in an inherently misogynist society. Right, so they're going to then, instead of just saying that it's crap and nobody wants to see that and nobody wants to have this ideas forced upon us, they're just going to blame us, the misogynistic society. It's our fault. Indeed, Banks had this excuse lined up before her film was even released. If this movie doesn't make money, it reinforces a stereotype in Hollywood that men don't go see women do action movies, she said in an interview. She even had an answer for why Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, which both had female lead answers, were major hits. I'm sure she did. And this is her saying, men will go see a comic book movie because that's a male genre. So even though there are movies about women, they put them in the context of feeding the larger comic book world. Yes, you're watching a Wonder Woman movie, but we're setting up 3 other characters, or we're setting up Justice League. Now, somebody's had a bad day. Whether or not men are as simple-minded as Banks suggests, her explanation doesn't account for why her film's target audience, young, empowered women, have also stayed away from the cinema. I know a lot of women that are interested in this. I know women that they want to go see. These are women that watch shows like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette on TV. They're not interested in these women action movies or anything like that. Not even when they're at home and have nothing else to do but watch Netflix or Amazon Prime. So they're not interested. And yeah, guys aren't interested either. And we're definitely not interested in having this feminist idea shoved down our throats. It's a joke. And how many more movies are going to keep losing money until they get the point? Eventually, they just won't get the funding, or some people will put their own money into it, but how much money is going to be lost until they give up? It says here, the more mundane truth here is that the whole concept of this feminist Charlie's Angels reboot is fundamentally flawed. You think? It wants to keep the silliness of the original TV show and be a modern, high-tech spy thriller, and it wants to make feminist points along the way. Inevitably, the pro-face feminism of the film sucks the life out of the silliness of the thrills. Yeah, have you ever known a feminist with a sense of humor? I sure have not. The 2000s Charlie's Angels movies worked because the stars, Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, and Lucy Liu, made fun of themselves. They knew they were playing ludicrous characters and embraced this. The new Angels, by contrast, are humorless and woke. Adept at lecturing, sneering, and putting down unreconstructed men. And no one, male or female, wants to be condescended to during their afternoon out at the cinema. This points to an underlying problem with today's feminist identity politics. It tries to understand social relations almost solely through a prism of gender relations. And when this theoretical model oversteps its boundaries and starts to inform how culture is made, it creates untruthful, uninvolving, and banal art. You got that right. The feminist call for more female representation in cinema has created a genre of what could be called the female voice film. The same could be said for films which are said to give voice to racial and sexual minorities. To translate from the cultural studies jargon, voice here refers to films in which a particular identity group is front and center. They star in these films and usually take a larger share of the writing, directing, and production credits. These films are supposedly informed by the experiences of these identity groups, in contrast to all other films which, by default, are said to reflect a white, male, and heteronormative experience. In this scheme, individuals are reduced to an identity, one based not on their totality, but on only a small part of who they are. This inevitably makes for shallow, two-dimensional films in which identity, rather than busting ghosts or carrying out heists, drives the plot and motivates the characters. Reducing people to identities turns fictional characters into unrelatable caricatures. Even films like the all-female Ghostbusters reboot, in which the individual performances are human, engaging and often hilarious, are in the end nullified by this reductionist framework. I remember a few years ago when they were pitching that Ghostbusters movie. I think it was 2016, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Because I remember being a little kid with the original Ghostbusters. It came out in 1984, I think. I was 6 years old. I love that movie. I watched it so many times. I actually built my own proton pack like they had. The Ghostbusters, I'd wear it around all the time. As a 6 or 7 year old, it was awesome. And so, even though Ghostbusters 2 wasn't that good, it was, entertaining enough when I was a kid. But first one was great. And then they did this. Oh, man. So it goes on to say here, these films also tend to feature a lot of clunking expositional dialogue, which expresses the filmmaker's agenda rather than the character's inner life. People instantly recognize this is a bad storytelling. This is why people stay away from films that pander to voices, and why so many men and women do not enjoy self-conscientiously female films. They present diminished caricatures of women, men, and human relations, which people experience as untrue. Ideological point scoring makes for terrible cinema. Well, you got that right. And as long as they keep doing these, these movies or TV shows are going to be total flops. And you're going to have, again, these feminist groups complaining about all this and pointing the finger and insulting men and anybody else they can. The fact that most people aren't buying into this idea. And so let them keep making these movies. I'll just sit back and laugh and read more articles about this and share more articles about this, about these flops, until finally they get the point. It'll be a while, but it'll happen. So, all right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below if you can think of any other movies that were female-led that were total flops. I'd love to hear about that. And also be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time.